Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, wool prices reach a 9-year high, but...
It's much improved, but as an organisation, we're acutely aware that it's not where it needs to be. The first goal is to get to that covering the shearing cost for the farmers.
More on that later. Now, all this week, COP30 is taking place in Brazil, with countries coming together later in the week to spend 2 days talking about agriculture and climate change. Well, on Farming Today, we're taking this opportunity to hear stories of farming and fishing from around the globe, to find out about the challenges faced by food producers in different parts of the world and the solutions they're working on to build resilience. Farming fish, aquaculture, rather than farming livestock, is being seen by some as the answer to sustainable food security. China is the world's biggest farmed seafood producer, providing more than 60% of the world's farmed fish, and it's investing in bigger and more high-tech fish farms. Jonah van Bijnen is a biologist and fish farmer working primarily in Asia and the Middle East.
China sees that in order to secure future needs for food locally, it needs to produce more seafood. Mostly this is because production on land is already fully utilized, so there's not much room to produce more livestock and more crops on land, so instead it has turned to the sea.
And what sorts of fish farms is that leading to?
So in the coastal zone you got typical fish ponds. It can be cages in the sea, and lately China has been working on a lot of innovative designs, including sunken structures that are anchored to the sea bottom or floating large ships.
Are there any concerns in China about the welfare of the fish in these systems?
Typically in Asia, and including China, there's much less focus on fish welfare. But of course, if one wants to run its farm profitable, you have to make sure that the fish are doing well and survive. High stocking densities tend to result in more pollution. And as in the past, the Chinese coastal zone and freshwater resources have been quite extensively polluted. They now enforce strict regulations on water quality. So this has an effect on the farms that they tend to use lower stocking densities. And many farms have been moving from open farming systems, where you typically put the wastewater back in public waters, to closed systems in which the water is recirculated.
How sustainable is this? What, for instance, are they feeding all these fish on?
So typically fish meal is used for this. But since there's been a lot of public attention on changing this, now more and more wastes, byproducts from processings are being used. And the industry has been looking for alternatives. So for example, quite a few companies have popped up that use insects to develop insect meal instead of fish meal. Other companies have started to work with bacteria that convert methane into protein. So this is quite an active segment, and it's definitely moving in the right direction.
We're speaking in the week of COP. When we're thinking about mitigating climate change, how does aquaculture fit into that?
It does play an important role because we, of course, need to feed the people on planet Earth. And aquaculture has proven to be the most efficient ways of producing animal protein, especially compared to species like cows, chickens, pigs. Fish can be produced much more efficiently using a relatively smaller environmental footprint.
Although, as we've seen here, where we have lots of fish farms, particularly in Scotland, they are controversial because campaigners say they have a big impact on the local environment.
Yes, you are correct. Everywhere, I think, there are good and bad farms. And it's a matter of governments that need to step in and to make sure that farms stick to the rules.
How many more fish farms would you expect to see in the next few years? Is this a really growing thing across the world?
Yes, especially in Asia, people tend to consume much more seafood than in Europe. The average Southeast Asian person consumes about double the amount of seafood that the average European consumes. And worldwide, we see a trend where people see the health benefits of eating fish. And as our population continues to grow, it's likely that aquaculture production will continue to grow as well.
Jonah van Bynen. Now, back to the UK and a dairy farmer who's getting out. James Appleby has been milking cows on his farm in Worcestershire all his working life. But this year's exceptionally hot summer and the resulting cost of feed for the animals has proved too much. Mr. Appleby says he's been forced to end his dairy business because he hasn't been able to produce enough feed for the cows because of the lack of rain, and the cost of buying in fodder for his 650-strong herd is prohibitive. Bob Hockenhull reports.
James Appleby and his son Tom are feeding a handful of calves, the only livestock left on their farm.
Put the dry cow in then.
This was an auction held last month to sell their cattle. They'd had a herd here at Fenton near Evesham since 1967, but the dry summer and lack of fodder has forced their hand.
We're very, very short of winter fodder. We were feeding a lot of cake all through the winter, and this isn't a one-off. I mean, it's been a very bad year for people within this area anyway. I think we were worse because we're in the Vale of Evesham. We were almost this bad 3 years ago. The dry summers seem to be getting more frequent, and they seem to be getting worse when they happen. So there's a definite change in climate, and that was the biggest trigger for doing what we did.
And normally you would produce the vast bulk of your fodder, wouldn't you?
Yeah, we aim to produce, both grazing, summer grazing and winter forage, winter silage. We would hope to produce the vast majority, but increasingly we're having to buy more and more. And this year, the amount we'd have to buy would have been prohibitive, and the cost of it.
Is there anything with hindsight you think you could have done to perhaps build financial resilience as far as fodder is concerned?
To be honest, I don't think we could. The deficits that we've had this year, the buffer, a few buffer stocks wouldn't have made that much difference. I mean, in truth, we have built financial resilience, but maybe not in terms of fodder.
For the moment, the Applebys will keep going with a sustainable farming incentive grant that lasts until spring 2027 and was taken out before the current suspension of the scheme. As James's son Tom explains.
We signed up to SFI pretty much as soon as the scheme was announced, mainly because we were doing a lot of the things that they required anyway. We were growing herbal leys.
Because they're suspended at the moment, are you concerned that you may not be able to get them again?
Yes. Yeah, so we've got just under a year and a half left of our current SFI agreement, and I hope by then we'll have had some clarity from DEFRA. That would be nice, but we'll live in hope. If these schemes weren't in place, what would we be doing? We'd be ploughing it all up and putting it into arable. So there is there's a public good for the public money. Certainly our soil will be better off for being in SFI, and it would be a shame to see those gains go to waste because of a short-term shortage of cash within DEFRA.
Tom Appleby in Worcestershire. The price farmers get for wool is up, about 20% up from last year, but it still doesn't cover the cost of shearing the sheep. As we've reported on this programme over the years, the fall in demand for carpets and woolly jumpers hit wool prices. But British Wool, which buys and markets the wool, hopes that now, with prices at a 9-year high, they've turned a corner. Graham Clark from British Wool told me that fewer sheep in the world means higher prices.
From a supply point of view, there is less wool on the market. If you look at Australia, a lot of that's down to climate change. They've had some really adverse climate change effects, so that's droughts and floods, meaning the loss of a lot of livestock. So a lot of farmers have moved out of sheep because of that. In New Zealand, they've had a campaign to plant more trees for carbon capture. Subsequently, their sheep numbers have fallen quite dramatically. And in the UK, one of the reasons is subsidies changing from per head to more of an environmental land management system. So probably different reasons for each individual country, which is quite interesting.
So the price has gone up, but there is a big but in all this, isn't there?
Yes, there's always a big but. It's not where it needs to be. So it's much improved. So the past 2 or 3 months, we've had some really good increase in the wool price. But as an organisation, we're acutely aware that it's not where it needs to be. The first goal is to get to that covering the shearing cost for the farmers.
Which is kind of basic, isn't it?
It is, and it's been really difficult since COVID. So And it's been a difficult task to get the price to somewhere near covering shearing costs. Where it stands at the moment, certain types of wool that farmers have would cover the shearing cost. So hopefully it'll continue in this positive vein, and we'll be able to give farmers a much more meaningful return for the wool than we've been able to do over the past few years.
I'm sure people listening to this will be thinking, well, a wool carpet and a wool jumper, they're not cheap items. So where is the money going in this chain?
Wool needs a lot of processing. So when wool leaves the farm, it needs to be cleaned as a first stage. Then it needs to be made into yarns and then carpets, and it gets retailed. So it's a massively long supply chain. Our job is to get as much value as possible for the farmers. And we try and do that through working with our licensee partners. So we work with 173 brands across the world. A high proportion of those are in the UK, but we do have partners in China, Japan, Korea, and also the US as well. And we're introducing schemes such as our traceable wool scheme, which is helping deliver more money back to our farmer members as well. And we charge a premium over our auction price for that. And that's starting to yield some really positive results.
Over the past few years here on Farming Today, we've spoken to farmers who just don't bother selling the wool. They either use it to insulate their own planting, or they just leave it. They don't bother doing anything with it. Do you think that will become a thing of the past?
I hope so. So this is a key message we're trying to get across to farmers is, the wool prices for the past few years have been not the best. However, wool prices have increased dramatically recently. So I would urge all farmers to give us a call and have a chat with our team, because your wool will be worth a lot more than it was possibly the last time you spoke to us. And it's extra revenue for the farmer.
Graham Clark there from British Wool. And that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Beatrice Fenton. And Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.